no welfare benefits, no voting, take a green card, get a job, build a life. That's what all of us did whose ancestors got here before 1924. And it worked. Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I thought I would take this Friday to talk about, well, the battles in America, the battles in the streets of America, and the battles for the composition of the country. But first, to the streets.
Demonstrators taking to the streets for yet another day, pushing back against the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Flashbangs lighting up the skies. Late last night, you can see the protesters there rushing to get away from the smoke and the blinding lights. Newly released video obtained by Bring Me the News also showing agents arresting 2 workers at a Target in Minnesota. A state lawmaker says both workers are U.S. citizens. The unrest sparked by an ICE agent fatally shooting Renee Good. The government now saying the agent suffered internal bleeding in the incident, but not providing any details on the severity of his injuries.
So I thought about going over, frankly, the reaction to the Good shooting and how it evolved as new videos came out, and also how people's views more or less didn't evolve. This has become like a Rorschach test for your own politics. And my views on immigration and all these issues, they don't have a happy home because I see this from a bunch of different sides. And I hope I can maybe expand the way you can talk about this with your spouse, with your kids, with yourself. But let's get back to the streets.
The Journal identified 12 other instances of federal immigration agents firing at or into vehicles since July. And one other resulted in a death. DHS told the Journal that in all of these incidents, the officer acted in self-defense because the drivers were using their cars as deadly weapons.
And let me just say, just at the human level, I mean, I think it's painful to see these things happen, regardless of who the person is or what their motivations were or what they were trying to do. Even if it's justifiable, even if it's self-defense, it's still fundamentally a tragedy. And I think if you fail to see that human reality, you're getting wrapped up in politics too much. So let's keep going.
Officers and our CBP officers are seeing highly coordinated campaign of violence against them. They still need to be able to carry out those operations. We do have to send those federal reinforcements so that we can continue with these operations and make sure that people and our law enforcement are safe.
One thing that many people talk about, but it is really interesting and worth noting, is the composition of a lot of these crowds and a lot of these activists. It is strikingly female. Strikingly so. Something has happened to our daughters, and they have turned street protest into a vector for the source of meaning.
Across the Twin Cities, a vast network of volunteers have mobilized to track federal agents.
Hey, I'm not impeding. You guys are all here. I'm not impeding. Go back to your vehicle. I got you.
The ICE agents, geared up, masked up, is bad optics if nothing else. It's hard not to see that. It's hard not to at least recognize that this isn't really the way we want America to look and feel. Even if for the most part, it mostly doesn't. It's not like everyone walking around the streets is seeing ICE agents on every corner. The news magnifies all this stuff, but it is arresting imagery. You get a sense of this activism, that almost, it's hard not to say it looks like a little bit of cosplay going on with this ride-along sequence.
The day after Good was shot, we joined Amanda Kohler and St. Paul City Council member Hwa-Jong Kim on an ICE watching patrol.
Hey, this is Amanda and Hwa-Jong. We're heading from north.
Gotta love the No Kings bandana.
North end towards Midway, unless you need us elsewhere.
Right now, they're looking for cars that they think might belong to ICE.
Could I get a plate check, please? I 905. Look at cars very closely now.
If the license plate comes up on a database compiled by activists, they'll sound the alarm.
You're hearing just a really incredible organized level of response in our neighborhood.
Thank you. You know what I wish? I wish that this protective instinct was in effect when our government locked down our entire society. That would have been nice. That would have been a great use of the motherly instinct to protect our kids from being kept out of school or any other amount of atrocities that have been committed to the public. This seems to be entirely a selective form of outrage, even if there's some legitimacy in some of the concerns. It's imbalanced.
When ICE activity is confirmed, volunteers blow whistles and honk car horns to warn immigrants in the area. Others follow ICE cars to the location of the raid. DHS has described these actions as interference by rioters and agitators.
Get the f*** out of here!
Is there a concern that the movement's being co-opted by people who are not sort of operating, who have not been operating the way that you have for the last month?
Frankly, different people have different spice levels, is how I talk about it.
Different people have different spice levels. Well, that's an interesting way to put it. There is a different spice level going on outside of Miss Lucite Glasses here. That is some of this stuff going on, like accosting an FBI vehicle to remove the guns from it.
Almost there.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, so here's where some of the guys come in. The guys with the face tattoos. Obviously, this entire thing has gotten white hot. And what are we supposed to think about this? As we sit here, we are 1 year into Trump 47. He made clear what his policy was going to be about immigration the whole time. So the public voted for this, or I should say a majority of the people who showed up to vote voted for this. There was always going to be a certain amount of this going on. You can't sort of engage Mr. Face Tattoo here and expect it to always be easy. Just remember, this was going on back in Los Angeles in June. So this level of civil disorder and taking to the streets destructively isn't new. I mean, just Los Angeles was turned into a war zone. And, one of the things that's interesting about wars is when two different nations are fighting and one wins, they raise their flag. That's actually one of the reasons why we have flags, is to signal victory, to signal that you've captured a territory. And so images like this in Los Angeles sure haven't helped anyone's understanding of what's going on with immigration or modern immigrants. Now, this guy's an outlier, but he's a loud one. So, of course, the Trump administration has come down hard. When this was all summer, you have to imagine ICE agents feeling, let's say, a little skittish as people approach their cars, or try to dox them, or try to put their homes on apps to be found, or to track them and send guys like this to be hiding for them. It's not hard to understand why the ICE agents are masked, given all of this that's going on, the coordination of all of it. Of course, President Trump has come out even harder, saying if the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their job, I will institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to this travesty. One of the other things the president and his administration have been doing is even further locking down on the broader immigration policy. So the State Department announced that they will pause immigrant visa processing for 75 countries whose migrants take welfare from the American people at unacceptable rates, et cetera, et cetera. These are major policy moves. Frankly, if you agree with the Trump administration and what they're doing, I think you should disagree with their excessive use of silly and ridiculous memes. This is the Twitter account for the Department of Homeland Security. It's like, what is going on? We are in idiocracy. There won't be a Shire, Pippin. Look, everything, we're really in, this is not my favorite part of this, even if it's sometimes funny. I'd rather get my humor from sources other than the Department of Homeland Security's X account. On a more serious note, Tom Homan more or less articulates, I think, the the argument for what's going on, including the forceful nature of ICE.
I can tell you that, anywhere between 65 and 70% of everybody we're arresting is a criminal. If you look at, we were, deported about 650,000 formal deportations since President Trump's been in office, and you take 65, 70% of that being criminals, that's a lot of bad people we deported.
One of the things that sort of distorts the deportation numbers when you look back historically, looking at, say, President Obama or Biden or even Trump 1, is the difference between being in the interior, like what's happening in Minnesota, versus turning people away right at the border. And so when you have a massive flood of people right at the border and you're turning them away, those are technically deportations and they drive those numbers up. And that's been one of the ways that the Biden administration, for example, tried to claim that they were being hard on illegal immigration, when in fact they were letting more people in than we've ever seen before.
There are Americans who see this and say this looks like Putin's Russia. What is your
That's ridiculous. You know what? In Minneapolis, let's remember who set the stage here. First of all, the Biden administration let millions of people release millions of illegal aliens in this country in violation of the law. Many of them criminals because they weren't properly vetted. We're arresting thousands of them. So first of all, they created the problem with millions of illegal alien criminals in this country. Second of all, Minneapolis, they're a sanctuary city. If they let us in their damn jail and stop being a sanctuary city, we could arrest the bad guy in the safety and security of a jail. But because they normally release them, now we got to go in the community and find them. Then they're mad we're in the community. President Trump made us promise to American people, we're going to find these criminals and make America safe again. So if they don't let us in a jail, we're going to go in the community. And the difference is, in places that's not a sanctuary, one agent can walk into a jail and arrest one criminal illegal alien. But when you release them in the community, now we got to send the whole team because we got to arrest somebody on their turf. They have access, who knows what weapons. It makes it dangerous for the officer, makes it dangerous for the alien, certainly makes it dangerous for the community. So if Minneapolis wants to help, like I saw Mayor Frey doing an interview this morning, let us in your damn jail.
And I think that of all of the positions, I think this is the most reasonable one he's articulating here. If you actually have someone in prison for committing an additional crime, something violent, property damage, and they aren't here legally, what are you doing? Why are states, it's all ideological games and it's all weird pandering to certain special interest groups to not turn someone who's a proven criminal over, especially when they aren't here legally. They are not a citizen. They don't have all the same protections as a citizen, including due process protections. I don't see how anybody can be in favor of their city or their state wanting to keep these people here and not turn them over to the feds. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to continue charging your own taxpayers for people staying in your jails? It's just crazy.
I think the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol are doing a difficult job in a very unfriendly area where law enforcement response for emergency responses, sporadic at best, death threats are up over 8,000%, actual assaults up 1,300%. They got a dangerous job to do. Again, let us in the jail to arrest a public safety threat. Because I said this 1,000 times, when you force us in the community to find the public safety threat, many times you're with others, or we find others in the process of doing that. If we find them, they're in the country illegally, they're getting arrested too. So more officers in the street means more collateral arrests. We have promised American people we're going to force immigration. So let me tell you why we have the most secure border in the history of this nation today. Part of it is because of what ICE is doing. We have shown the whole world there are consequences to enter this country illegally. We're not going to send a message, cross the border illegally, it's a crime, don't worry about it, get order removed, don't worry about it. Unless you committed another crime, no one's looking for you. If that's the message we send, you're never going to fix this problem. We send a strong message, and that's why we have the most secure border in the history of the nation. And President Trump, by doing that, is saving thousands of lives.
The Trump administration is clearly sending a message. They're sending a message with the aggressiveness of ICE. It is a tactic. He's saying it explicitly, and it's his job. So this is his policy. It has domestic political ramifications. But it also clearly has international ramifications because the data on what's happened here is pretty striking. For the first time in over 50 years, net migration is negative in the United States. This is really pretty unprecedented. But you know what was also unprecedented? The surge of illegal immigration that happened under Joe Biden.
As thousands of undocumented migrants flood across the southern border, some stunning new drone images reveal the scope of the massive influx of migrants into the U.S.
Eagle Pass, Texas, inundated this morning with one of the largest mass illegal crossings we have ever seen at the southern border. A massive line in the river and on U.S. soil as thousands crossed illegally in a span of roughly 2 hours, nonstop.
Hola, ¿de dónde son?
The illegal immigrants were predominantly adult men from Venezuela.
Predominantly adult men from Venezuela. The military age men.
With many of them telling us they arrived in northern Mexico via train and walked an hour to the border to cross in a huge mess, all at once, as the Mexican military watched without taking any action. The masses of migrants then waited under the international bridge for processing, a strikingly similar scene to what was seen in Del Rio, Texas, exactly 2 years ago when thousands of Haitians crossed illegally.
I mean, this is what was going on for the past 4 years prior to the election. This was the posture of the prior administration.
They're coming across because they believe they will be welcomed under the Biden administration. You said yourself 3 weeks ago, we're not saying don't come, we're saying don't come now. President Biden had a stronger message later, but the messages are mixed at best, Mr. Secretary.
Martha, good morning. The message is quite clear. Do not come. The border is closed. The border is secure.
The level of lying that was going on a mass scale was really quite spectacular. The border is secure. The border is closed. But let's not forget that there were different promises being made right from the start.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
This is the ratchet effect. There's a deep asymmetry. It is much, much easier to come in than it is for us to send people out. There's several reasons for that. One of them is, as we're seeing in Minnesota, once you're here, we're a big country, you can hide pretty easily. And it's very, very expensive and very labor intensive for people to find you, to confirm that you are here illegally. As we also have seen this year, the countries that these people come from who cross the border illegally, particularly from some of the harshest places like Venezuela, these countries simply refuse to accept people when we deport them back. And so what are you supposed to do? Drop them out of helicopters like Pinochet? I mean, this is one of the problems with the issue, and it creates very toxic incentives, especially if, like Joe Biden and others in his party have said over the years, you basically want demographics to be destiny for your voter base. So I used Gemini to create this cool little graph. This is net migration, so in minus out, since 1830. And as you can see, in absolute numbers, in total amounts, 2024 was an absolute barn burner, as was 2023 and 2022. But 2024 saw almost 2.8 million people enter the country on net. This is truly unprecedented. And the rate of increase from the low in 2021 has never been seen before. We have never seen anything like this. And similarly, we have never seen anything like, ever, the turnaround between 2024 and 2025, which according to this data, which is based on estimates from multiple sources, we are actually net negative by at least 150,000 people in migration. Now, you look at this and you say, that's unbelievable. You can't believe it, and it makes sense why this would be such a big political issue. One thing to know is that this is in absolute numbers. And when you look historically and go further and further back, it's not necessarily the best way to look at it in terms of the impact on our population, because we've gotten a lot bigger and more populous. So when you actually normalize for population, net migration as a share of the population at the time in that year, things look a lot different, actually. So this is net migration adjusted for population. And what you actually see is that the period between 1940 and essentially 2021 is a much lower period of immigration than the prior 100 years, which is really something. Even with this adjustment, the Biden acceleration is truly unprecedented. And the only thing that comes close to Trump is over multiple years and includes the collapse of the entire economy because of the Great Depression. And this is why I think it's important to actually take a step back on here and look at the bigger picture, because it was always going to be the case that there was going to be incidents that would be turned into essentially activism rallying cries. That was going to be inevitable. There is no way to do what the Trump administration is doing and not have incidents happen. I actually wrote a piece about immigration and my views on it at the start of last year that got published over at Fox News, and it's also over at dadssavesamerica.com. But my views on this have evolved quite a bit. And frankly, if you asked me 5 years ago where I was on immigration, I would say I was basically in favor of relatively open borders. And the reason for that is because, frankly, that is what built America up until the mid-1920s. That's frankly the immigration that brought my ancestors into the country. I'm Italian American. My great grandparents came here in the 1920s. And most of the people that came, well, they were like Superman, who himself is an immigrant.
Why are you here? There must be a reason for you to be here.
Yes, I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
You're going to end up fighting every elected official in this country.
That's the best. I am more skeptical of immigration than I was, but I'm still more pro-immigration, probably than many of you. More pro-immigrant, certainly, than President Trump, even though I voted for him in support of a lot of what he's doing. I have mixed feelings about what's happening on the immigration front, although I'm certainly happy to see criminals get sent out of the country. One of the things that has obviously made this such a big focus in Minnesota, why Minnesota, of all places, has been at the center, is because the particular profile of the immigration problems there are pretty distinct, as we've all been seeing for the past couple of weeks.
And now we have a group of Somalis telling us in our vehicle right now.
From this daycare center, we headed over to the infamous Quality Learning Center, which actually spells Quality Leering Center on the outside of their sign. That's how blatant this fraud is here at this daycare.
Don't open up!
So this is Quality Leering Center. I meant to say Quality Learning Center.
Don't open
They
up!
said they spelt learning wrong.
Don't open up!
Well, we see another. If you're gonna do profiling on these people, it's hard not to. It's hard not to. The pattern recognition kicks in. I'm sorry.
How do you have ice here, ma'am? I'm literally a YouTuber.
Don't open up!
So this scandal's been well-worn territory. It is, but it points to one of the things that has made me more concerned about immigration, namely that there are cultures that don't share the most fundamental American values as I understand them. And I think Somalia is one of those cultures. I think Somalia has a lot of deep and profound problems, and those problems come with the people that come here. They do.
What percentage of Somali-headed households in Minnesota are on Medicaid?
I don't know.
It's 73%. Do you know what that number is for Minnesota native households?
Again, you're using the phrase Minnesota native households, but the majority...
The number is 18%.
That's incredible. This is like a turbo super majorities on Medicaid.
That's quite an astounding difference. I think we would agree.
Can I answer the question, please?
Let me ask you one more, and then we can go on to that. What percentage of Somali-headed households are on welfare in general?
I don't know.
It's 81%. What about, let me just ask you, after 10 years of being in the United States, what percentage of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare?
I don't know.
The number is 78%.
So after 10 years, you've only got a 2% reduction in reliance on the dole, on the taxpayers of the United States and of the state of Minnesota. It's not good.
So even after 10 years, 78% of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Again, you're using the phrase,
non-Somali immigrant-headed households.
If I can just answer the question, when you're using the phrase native Minnesotans, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are as Minnesotan as any of us. They were born in the United States. It's only 8,000 of the 108,000 Somali.
Nevertheless, the welfare usage is astoundingly different. Let me ask you again, does that make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
These facts are really, really something. Culture is a thing. Culture is more than one individual person. We should take each person as they come. No matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, no matter what they sound like, we should take each person as an individual. But it is also true that there is this thing called culture, and especially in countries that are monolithic, like Somalia, which is like 99% Islamic and corrupt, and this is what we get.
I'd like the opportunity to answer the question here. So, again, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are born in the United States, as I understand it.
Okay, well, what percentage of working-age Somalians who have been in the U.S. for 10 years or more, how many of them speak English very well?
I don't know.
About half.
Now, in fairness to that particular one, if you're an adult, it's pretty hard to learn a second language. Now, 10 years should be enough, but, I've got grandparents that were still pretty bad at it, after being here for decades and decades. So, that one, that's not as strong a point.
Ms. Robbins, when would you say we concretely knew that widespread welfare fraud was occurring in Minnesota?
There have been reports since 2009 from the Office of Legislative Auditor. I would say the credible reports on childcare fraud started surfacing 2011 to 2013.
So for over a decade.
Yes, sir.
The cultural expectations of what's the right thing to do, those are habits that have to be taught. Those are habits that have to form. And they require you assimilating into a culture that's high trust and has respect for the rule of law. So let's just take a quick look at the Corruption Perceptions Index from Transparency International. They have been doing these surveys and doing this work for a pretty long time, going all the way back to 1995. So 2024, this is the most recent data. Number one, Denmark. Not a surprise. I've been to Denmark. It's one of the happiest places in the world. It is incredibly tiny and homogenous. Same with Finland and Singapore and New Zealand and Luxembourg and Norway and Switzerland. Tiny and homogenous and high trust all seem to go hand in hand. We like to be with people that are like us. That's just the facts. That's why actually when you poll people in Denmark and Finland and Norway and Sweden about their welfare states, the kinds of things that Somali immigrants in Minnesota seem to like taking advantage of to the tune of 78 to 80%, and you ask them, do you support a welfare state? They say, oh yes, very high, very high. When you ask them, do you support a welfare state if it's going to people that are from a different country and are of a different kind? The numbers collapse. They sound exactly like your typical middle American. That's the facts. These surveys have been done repeatedly. But back to corruption. What's going on here? So, here we are at the very top. All those northern Nordic countries, isn't that lovely? Great chocolate. Then we get Canada, Germany, Hong Kong. The United States could do better than we are. We're down at number 28, which is still pretty high, but we've been going down. We're not, we're below the Bahamas. That's not, we're below the United Arab Emirates. Even so, still a pretty low corruption state, all things considered. Let's keep going. How far down do we have to go? Oh, we have to go. I scrolled past it. We have to go all the way to the bottom. Below Venezuela, and for now, above South Sudan, you have Somalia, out of 180 countries. In fact, they sort of linger, battling it out for who's the worst. In 2023, they actually were the worst. They beat out Venezuela for being the most corrupt country on planet Earth. So it's not really clear why we want people from the most corrupt country on Earth who also are almost entirely of a religious tradition that you could say is totalitarian and antithetical to American principles and the Constitution. This is where I part ways with my open borders friends today. I don't know why we want those people. Minnesota is what it is. They've got what they've got. And so you could say they're trying to make the best of their situation. And the governor, who's decided he's not going to run again, who happened to be the vice presidential pick in 2024, which is easy to forget in a way how radical that actually was. He sort of has gone all in. This was him back in 2023 with a jokey little performance.
All right, ready. Whoa, wait a minute. There, that's better.
All of these modern redesigns, it's like they want to be like a tech firm from like the late 2010s. But there's also something deeper going on here.
We had a racist flag, so we got a new flag in Minnesota and got rid of it.
A racist flag. He's not alone. Good old masked Biden was there standing in front of that racist flag. What's the deal with the racist flag? Is it the Native American on the horse? That's the racist part? Is the guy pushing the plow black? I'm sure there probably is racist stuff in this flag. I mean, the guy on the horse seems like he's having a good time. Maybe he's being hunted. I don't know. But this flag is not great. And the funny thing is, and other people have pointed this out, when I searched Somali flag, well, the Minnesota flag comes up in the image search, and for obvious reasons. There is another flag. It's an interesting, one of the things that's actually funny is that the Somali flag actually has a standard 5-pointed star, like the stars and stripes in the US flag. But you know what has the 8-point star, like the new Minnesota flag? The Ottoman Empire's flag. Yep. Who did this? Who did this flag? It's exactly who you would expect. And I don't feel like doxing people. That's not how I roll. But it's a guy that has a lot of flags, a lot of signaling, a lot of social signaling. Let's get vaccinated is among the photos on his public feed. Minnesota's weird. Minnesota's always been weird. It used to be weird for being Scandinavian. It was also weird for putting forward Walter Mondale and being noteworthy and being the only state not to vote for Ronald Reagan during his re-election. President Trump talks about the greatest landslide in all of American history, but he was around for the Reagan re-election. Every state but one. But indeed, the Scandinavians, the Swedes that originally occupied Minnesota, they're on the way out. And you have to look no further than, frankly, some of the imams around this country to find out why. And to find out why, despite Somalis being a tiny, tiny percentage of American society, Somali immigrants are being made an example. In fact, I'm doing that too. I'm making an example of them. But we aren't at risk of Somalis taking over the country. We're not. Their ideology, I think, is worth being more concerned about.
If the Swedish population maintains its negative and the Muslim population maintains, Muslims have, mashallah, the average of 5, 6, 7 kids, right? The average, mashallah, that's our secret weapon, I say.
Our secret weapon. Our secret weapon. Don't forget that. This is a very friendly sounding guy in the East Plano Islamic Center. That's in Texas. Our secret weapon.
The prediction is, this is the halal secret weapon, guys, huh? So nobody take the video and miss it. Halal secret weapon. It's not our fault we have more kids, guys. You want to do whatever you want to do. It's all halal, alhamdulillah.
And he's right about that. It's our fault that we don't have enough kids.
If the projection continues, I was told by one of the local counselors there that within one generation, it is very likely that this city will almost be half Muslim. because this city is just not there. The locals are not reproducing. It's not our fault. I mean, it's not, I don't know why they're getting irritated at us. It's not our fault we're having kids, right? So it's not even, so the point is what's going to happen to the majority?
Stuff like this, statements like this and far more radical might be why among the activity at the State Department is designating the Muslim Brotherhood chapters as terrorist organizations. This is just from a couple days ago. I'm not saying this imam is a terrorist, but I do think his ideology is not necessarily compatible with the things I understand to be fundamentally American. I could be wrong about that. I am not an expert, but I don't love what I hear. I don't love what I hear about the things I cherish, like equality under the law, let's say, which is fundamentally a Christian and then British construction. You get this from a lot of folks, this kind of stuff, this kind of supremacy. In fact, for all the talk of white supremacy, there's a lot of other supremacy going around out there.
You have lost. You lost. The mistake that you made is you let us in the first place. See, that's the thing with brown people. I'm going to say this as a brown person. There's a lot of us. Like a lot. There's like 1.2 billion in India. There's more than 200 million in Pakistan. There's like 170 million in Bangladesh. Those are just the people there. I'm even talking about the folks who are expats or immigrants. There's a bunch of us. And we breed. We're a breeding people. And the problem is you let us in 1965. There were a few of us beforehand. But once you let one of us in, you know what happens with brown folks? Our grandmother comes, our grandfather comes, our uncle comes, our aunt comes, our cousin comes, our second cousin comes, our third cousin comes. Then we have kids, a bunch of kids. And then guess what? Some white women, you know, the Western civilization women, the pure women, the American women, quote unquote, the Rust Belt women, the real women, they like some of us brown folks.
He's obviously provoking. It's on purpose. He's trying to get a rise out of people on Twitter. I also think he believes all this. And here comes the part. That's really the part. All this talk of brown people is just, you know, good old critical theory racism. But this part that comes next is one of the things that has shifted my thinking, because this is very broadly held. And as I wrote in my Fox piece, it's broadly held maybe even more among our so-called elite in universities than it is by the actual brown people that tend to come to this country, who are mostly fairly personally conservative Catholic Mexicans, people I like. Most of the brown people here in Texas think this guy is a clown. Most of the brown people along the border with Mexico voted for Donald Trump. But the next part really says it all.
Your story is a story filled with misery. It's filled with bland chicken. It's filled with terrible, terrible dry ass meat. Your music sucks. All your culture sucks. Nobody. That's why the kids like listen to black people and their music. That's why the kids love Latinos. Your parties suck because they're monochromatic. Our parties have better food, better music, better looking women.
This is the new racism. This is the new chauvinism. Our story sucks. Our people suck. Now, who's the you here? It's whites. It's white people. It's white culture. But I'm going to use the West. I'm going to use Western Europe. That's the wellspring of America. We are a colony of Britain first, and even the non-British were French and Spanish, and then Irish and German and Italian. The West, Western Europe. Our story is the greatest story this planet has ever seen, you bozo. That's a fact. Our music is the greatest music ever composed. It's Beethoven, it's Bach, it's the Renaissance. That's our story. Our story is the invention of literally everything. Where should we begin? Should we begin with philosophy, invented by the Greeks? I guess you could call them light brown, like me, like Sicilians, but still fundamentally inside the West. How about all forms of modern communication, going back to the telegraph, invented by us? All forms of locomotion, invented by us. The internet, invented by us. And this guy is a clown, and his story is nonsense. And I am not saying this because I believe in white pride. I think the entire concept of whiteness is some kind of imbecilic metaphysic assertion. It has no basis in reality. I don't even think of myself as being particularly white because I'm an Italian. I'm not an Italian, I'm an American, but I am of Italian descent. And both my people and frankly, the far more white Irish were also treated like second-class citizens when we came to this country. And you know what? We did pretty good. And even the story that you often will claim as yours, like the Islamic Golden Age, was the Christian Golden Age. Because basically all of North Africa and the Middle East was Christendom. It was the Byzantine Empire. And it was Christendom. And all that art and all of that literature and all that culture was built by the Christians there. The Christians in Egypt and Syria and Lebanon, until they were conquered by warlords. So you're just spewing ahistoric nonsense. He's not alone in spewing ahistoric nonsense. He's more articulate than some, because our kids are subjected to this stuff all the time. Here is a Rutgers professor saying even more, imbecilic stuff.
Whiteness is going to have an end date, because it is not, despite what white people think of themselves, they do not defy the laws of eternity, right? Their projects are not so sophisticated that the natural laws of physics change for them. And when we sort of humble them humble our own understandings of whiteness, it seems like the biggest giant that we face. But in the end, right, it is what I like to say is, Black folks were out here for centuries and centuries and millennia doing all kinds of wonderful things, and probably some fucked up things too, but whiteness is largely an inconvenient interruption.
An inconvenient interruption that happened to invent all of modernity. The roll of the dice, the veil of ignorance, historically, goes something like this. If you're behind sort of the Rawlsian veil of ignorance and you're wondering, where should I be born if I'm going to be in the bottom of society? And I've got to roll the dice and hope. Where would I be born if I'm going to roll the dice on my station in a society? It's crystal clear, and everyone knows it, and it's why our borders are generally having the doors knocked down on them. Western societies, colonized by the British. Those are all the best places on planet Earth. They're the places everyone wants to go. There's people cramming themselves into boats and drowning half the time to get into the United Kingdom. And what's going on in the United Kingdom is part of the reason why I've become a lot more worried about totalitarian ideologues coming into this country, and totalitarian ideologues like this guy, who's actually a contributor to the New York Times, of course, so he's not just your normal Yahoo. Wanting to destroy our society from within. This country has a storied history when it comes to immigration, and it's worth revisiting it, because I think most people don't really fully understand the precedents that are part of what laid the tracks for where we are now.
We began as 13 states along the Atlantic seaboard. We pushed across the Alleghenies, the Ohio River, the Mississippi, the last far range of the distant Rockies. We carried freedom with us. No aristocratic classes here. No kings. No nobles or princes. No state church. No courts. No parasites. No divine right of man to rule man.
No parasites. I'm not sure what this old-timey guy was talking about with parasites. It might have been parasites from above, actually, mostly. The aristocrats, the feudal lords, sort of living off the work of others while not being particularly productive. That is the pre-capitalist era. Over the course of American history, we have experienced several different waves of immigration and immigration policy. So one of the first instances of confronting the issue was the Naturalization Act of 1790. And this basically established right from the beginning that as a matter of American precedent and law, we can discriminate on who comes in on the basis of whatever criteria we feel will preserve our culture and our laws. It restricted naturalization to free white persons of good character who had resided in the U.S. for 2 years. One of the things that's interesting about American history is that coming to the country, immigrating, technically wasn't really being controlled until much, much later. The original naturalization laws and policies were simply about who could actually be a full citizen. But you could just come on over if you survived the boat trip. A big milestone, of course, was the 14th Amendment, which enshrined the idea of birthright citizenship, which is moving its way through the courts right now. And President Trump is trying to overturn birthright citizenship, or narrow the interpretation of the 14th Amendment to only apply to the slaves, which is what it was actually mostly intended for. It was mostly intended to deal with the fact that we now had people who need to be given full citizenship as should their kids, freed Black Americans. And it's important to understand the phases that come next. So I want to go back to our graphic. So one of the things that starts the first wave of restrictions on immigration is the arrival of my great-grandparents. Literally, in the late 1800s, heading into 1920s, there was a first massive wave of immigration. It really peaked in 1910 in absolute terms and as a share of the population. This was the wave of Germans, then Irish, then Italians, and others. And a series of laws were passed along the way in reaction to this, because as it turns out, there is something like a natural social reaction to too many foreigners coming into your community. There is a threshold that triggers a response. I'm not even saying whether that's good or bad. It's just a fact. And so the first couple laws to restrict immigration. First was the Page Act and the Chinese Exclusion Act, and these were often quite explicitly racial. But really the big shift, the big contraction, was the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924. And this not only was a response to my great-grandparents coming over, but it was also rigged in a certain way because it established the nation of origin's quota system. And that system set the start point at 1890 before my grandparents showed up, and basically said the composition of America as in terms of shares of ethnicities and countries of origins, it was about right in 1890, and moving forward, we should only accept people from those countries in those proportions. And so when you look at the graph, what you see, first of all, is a total collapse in immigration, and then a very slow growth from there until you get to 1965. Now, as I said, those early 1900s was where my great-grandparents, like Gino Alberto Popola, arrived in 1910 at the peak. On my mother's side, Enrico Harry Fadulo, my great-great-grandfather on my mom's side, arrived in 1899. I was the Mexican of the 1920s, 1910s. And as you'll see later, that is very much how the culture treated us. Fast forward to the 1960s, and everything changes. And one of the things that happens in the 1960s is the birth of a phrase, a nation of immigrants. It's actually John F. Kennedy that originally crafted this phrase basically as a way to soften the public towards immigration reform. And I imagine it was partly because his family was Irish. And so he had a sense of, heritage and pride and a belief that it was not right that the 1924 restrictions essentially made it hard for people like him to come to America. But what came next was the biggest change we've had in immigration since 1924, and there hasn't been anything like it since. And that is the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965.
Congress passed and President Johnson signed into law the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965. This act profoundly changed the flow of people coming into America. It did away with a quota system that had been in place since the 1920s. It heavily favored people from Northern and Western Europe and severely restricted Asian and African immigrants. President Kennedy called the quota system intolerable, and after his assassination, immigration reform gained political steam. Civil rights, after all, were in the air. JFK's younger brother, Ted Kennedy, now a senator from Massachusetts, was one of the 65 bill's biggest boosters. Speaking of the Statue of Liberty, President Johnson signed the bill at the foot of America's welcome mat. How's that for symbolism? The new rules opened America's doors to new categories of immigrants. These included family members of American citizens, skilled laborers and professionals, and political refugees. Middle Eastern, Asian, and African immigrants were now able to come to the U.S. and put down roots here.
And many of the people that have come into this country since, under the 1965 Act, have made this country better and are beautiful, wonderful people. And I don't want any of the things I'm talking about to ever seem like I'm not in favor of great people coming to this country. In fact, I have great people like that in my own family. But there were promises made at the time of this from good old, especially Teddy Kennedy. And, you know, an older Teddy Kennedy sort of lays out his ideas for what motivated him.
What are the values that Americans care very much about? They care about people that work very hard. They care about people that care about their families. They care about people that have a faith and an understanding of their faith. And they care very much about people that want to contribute and make America great.
Make America great. It's just funny to hear Teddy Kennedy say that.
It so happens that those values are so often the values of the immigrants that were coming here. What they did, what you had on the other side of the coin, is this enormous magnet of the American economy, drawing those individuals here. And those people came because they were prepared to sacrifice for their families, prepared to sacrifice.
I was going to make a Chappaquiddick joke, but I'll leave it at that with the reference to it. Teddy Kennedy is a morally compromised character, to say the least. But what he's saying there is actually fundamentally true. By and large, immigrants to this country share those fundamental values, and or at least have historically and broadly do, I think, even to this day. The problem with this act, first, is what it promised. And what it promised, what Teddy Kennedy himself told the voting public, is that the 1965 immigration bill would not fundamentally transform the demographics of America. That was told to the public. That was the pretense under which this bill was sold to the public. So what exactly happened since then? Well, so here we are. I again asked Gemini to kind of concoct a graphic from the underlying data. And here we are. This is the demographics of 1900. And again, white is a very broad category that includes a lot of people that have been trying to kill each other forever for a very long time, including people that aren't that different, like the Catholic Irish and the Protestant British. But I digress. We were 87.9% white in 1900. Fast forward to 1924. No real change. In fact, a slight bump. And part of the reason for that bump is that actually Latinos were often clumped in as being white. It was really just black or white back then, literally and figuratively. Let's jump ahead a little more to 1950. Virtually no change. So again, we are under the regime of the 1924 restrictions. Now, 1965, 15 years later, the act is passed. Now we see the beginning of the change. 1975, just 10 years later, the number has come down quite a bit. 1995, of course, we get some of this other stuff going on. The concept of Hispanic is invented because Hispanic is this crazy thing that includes people from Spain, but also South America, which is, it's a concoction. I think Latino is more appropriate. But nonetheless, whites are now 73%. Now let's jump ahead to 2005. Now whites are down to 66. Again, our friends to the south, African Americans are basically standing in place as a population, and the reason for that is almost entirely abortion. Margaret Sanger's disgusting, evil eugenics plan to try to wipe out Black America with abortion was succeeding fairly spectacularly in keeping their population running in place. Just the facts. These are historical facts. Hispanic continues to grow. We get more Asians, and jump ahead another 10 years to 2015. White is down to 61%, Hispanic 17%. And as of today, we are now below 60%. We the whites. Hispanic is nearly 20%. And more than half of that group voted for Donald Trump last year. Let's not forget. If the promise was the demographics of America were not going to fundamentally change from 1965 Act, that like the promises about the costs of Medicaid and Medicare, or the promises about Social Security being an actual account that you have as opposed to just a transfer scheme right from the start, was a lie, because this is what happened very, very quickly and is still going on. Now, the other thing that happened in 1965 was the passage of the Great Society and the creation of welfare. Welfare, Medicaid, Medicare, that all came in 1965. And I think it's important to understand that that represents a fundamental structural shift in the incentives around immigration, as we've seen among the Somali population, 75 to 80% of whom make use of these programs 10 years into being here. I think Milton Friedman put this pretty well.
The United States, as you know, before 1914 had completely free immigration. Anybody could get on a boat and come to these shores, and if he landed on Ellis Island, he was an immigrant. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? You will find hardly a soul who will say it was a bad thing. Almost everybody will say it was a good thing. But then I suppose I say to the same people, but now what about today? Do you think we should have free immigration? Oh no, they'll say, we couldn't possibly have free immigration today.
And this is being recorded in, I think, 1980s or so. So this is not long after the Immigration Act's passage and the passage of welfare.
Why is it that free immigration was a good thing before 1914 and free immigration is a bad thing today? Well, there's a sense in which that answer is right. There's a sense in which free immigration, in the same sense as we had it before 1914, is not possible today. Why not? Because it is one thing to have free immigration to jobs. It is another thing to have free immigration to welfare. And you cannot have both.
Welfare or open immigration, take your pick. Now, this makes a lot of sense. And I think it's one of the reasons why Senator Rand Paul has recently announced legislation to try to deal with this.
You know, we ought to change the rules and not have refugees get welfare at all. And so I have a bill that would say refugees don't get it. And people say, well, gosh, these poor people come from war-torn areas. How will they survive? Well, they will survive the way we traditionally did, is when we admitted people, if you sponsored them, they're your responsibility. So you have many of these charities involved with bringing people here, and then the church charity thinks that charity involves signing them up for welfare. No, charity involves if your charity brings them here and they aren't working enough to have food, you feed them. It's charitable to give your own money. It's not charitable to take someone else's money.
Taxpayer subsidies and transfer schemes are not charity. They're not. You can't be moral at the point of a gun. That is my very libertarian angle on that. Charity, and frankly, as a Catholic, the Catholic position, the position of the church has always been far more pro-immigrant than most Americans on average, actually. And I broadly share that. I broadly believe, both through my own experience and as a matter of looking at the history, that most immigrants to this country, we are blessed by the people who come here for the most part. The problem we have, more than anything else, are the systems that encourage bad behavior and bad actors. So I want to just show you two different ways to look at this, because it is actually rarely talked about with this detail, and why not? We're pretty far into this video at this point as it is. My friends over at the Cato Institute, particularly Alex Naresta, has assembled, to the best I think of his ability, and I think fairly impartially, what it looks like for individuals in terms of consumption of welfare benefits. And what he has found is that all immigrants consume 21% less welfare benefits than native-born Americans, people born in this country. And actually non-citizens, including people who are here illegally, many, perhaps even most of whom came here legally initially and then overstayed their visa, consume even less. And you might be asking, well, how could that be possible? In Popola, you were just talking about all those Somalis that are like using welfare like crazy. Well, the Somalis and their culture of corruption are a particularly narrow and extreme case. But the fact of the matter is that the guys you see waiting outside of Home Depot have no interest in getting sent back to Mexico. And so in general, they try not to take any government handouts because it sets them up to be in the system. I know this for a fact. I know this for a fact as I sit here now since 2011, a Texan, a border state guy. That's a big part of what's going on now. There is a different way to look at this, and this is from another data set which looks at households instead of individuals. And the households, and I think this is important and this is meaningful, tell a different story. That 1965 bill created what's called chain migration. That working age male comes along and then brings with him his infirmed grandmother and mother and his wife who's got a bunch of kids and all the kids. And so the argument goes, and I think this is a completely reasonable argument, is that sure, that working guy or gal, but it's mostly guy, he's not taking welfare benefits, but he's brought his whole family. And so we've got to look at the household. And when you analyze this data on the basis of households, well, then immigrants use more than native-born Americans, and non-citizens use even more still. 59% more for non-citizens, 54% more for all immigrants, which includes non-citizens. So basically the differences there are small. So those are two ways to look at this information. For my friends at Cato, and for, in a sense, my former self, although again, I'm still quite pro-immigration in general, I think you have to ask yourself, is this really compelling? For non-citizens to consume 54% less of our taxpayer benefits than actual citizens. That's still quite a bit more than zero, which means you're still having very large numbers of people come to this country and go on the dole. And when you look at all immigrants, including legal, to come here legally and go on the dole and take from other citizens who have contributed to the tax base of the society is outrageous. That is not a particularly good argument. You shouldn't get a nickel if you come here, whether you're a refugee or not, whether you're legal or not. If you're gonna come into our game, you don't get to immediately reach into the pot and grab a bunch of chips out of the center of the table. That is just a scam. It's completely unfair. And frankly, I think it's a moral travesty that turns people against good, healthy, enriching immigration. People that are going to come here and frankly, in a lot of cases, be better than our own kids graduating from Columbia with all of their cockamamie communism. That's a big part of my article over at Fox, is that frankly, we are producing worse people in our own kids coming out of universities on average as a matter of ideology than most immigrants. This is all the dollars and cents. And I absolutely think nobody should get anything. If you are coming here, you should be like, it's 1800 for you. Welfare hasn't been invented. You gotta live or die on the basis of whether you can produce and create and earn, or whether some wonderful charitable person or church or organization can help you get on your feet because you are the victim of some horrible war and atrocity or whatever. I'm not against charity. Charity's great. Charity should replace the state. But when it comes to the cultural factors, they are also a little more complicated. So here's just a couple and then I'll start to wrap things up. Are we importing a bunch of radical commies? Well, I think if we're importing from largely Islamic countries, that is a different story. Places like Somalia that are 99% Islamic and often radical and have been in essentially religious warfare for decades on end, I don't know why we want any of those people. It's not crystal clear to me why Islamic immigration should be allowed at all. On the basis of what that creed, which is both a religion and a political doctrine, says. But I'm going to get to a little bit of that in a second. But in general, how do immigrants think? What are they like? Well, there's a bunch of stuff that's actually pretty interesting. Number one, this is from various polling data. First-generation immigrants actually think more highly of our country than we, the people who have been born here. They have a higher, although it's still quite low, so they're still reasonable. They have a higher sense of confidence in the Congress and the presidency than native-born citizens. Now, Maybe that's actually not good, but I think the reasons for that is because they're happy to be here, and this place is a lot better than where they came from, which is why they came in the first place. Secondly, they have comparable levels of pride to Americans born here. However, they feel a lot less shame than native-born Americans who feel quite a bit of shame about our society, which I find to be ridiculous. We're one of the greatest societies and the most benevolent societies this planet has ever seen. Even as far as empires go, we're pretty darn good. We're maybe not even as benevolent as the British, but I'd say we're pretty close. We're a lot better than the other empires that came before. Even so, people that choose to come here are pretty happy they're here and generally don't complain as much as our kids graduating from Harvard and Columbia. Finally, the demographics is destiny replacement types who are very real and have been saying that stuff out loud for decades on the blue team. They got their asses handed to them in 2024 because a majority of Latinos voted for Donald Trump and a near majority of Asians, which is the two categories that exploded after 1965, shifted votes. In general, we still assimilate people pretty well. And actually, those conservative Catholic Mexicans that come here working like animals and having lots of kids are more conservative than your daughter, most likely. So I think that's worth taking seriously when you're thinking about immigration into the United States. Again, I am like a softie. I'm like a dove with a machine gun. I love these people, most of them, but the ones that shouldn't be here need to get the hell out. Finally, even though this is true, it's not clear to me why anyone that comes here for the first time, having been born elsewhere, should vote or be able to occupy any public office. That is like coming to a game that's already in progress and trying to change the rules. It's like that jerk that shows up on at a pickup basketball game and suddenly wants to change things around. I'm sorry. If you've arrived here because you wanted to come, you should just have to play by whatever the rules are now, as broken as they are, and be happy you're here. I want to hear in the comments what you think of this. But in general, even if it would benefit politicians that I prefer, I don't think first-generation people should be allowed to vote or run for office. If that were the case, we wouldn't have Zoran Mamdani. And in fact, if we actually just upheld the laws of this country currently, which don't allow communists or people with a totalitarian ideology, it's not clear how his father would have been admitted into the country at all for being a radical communist. Instead, of course, he's a professor at Columbia University. Those are some of the ways I think we can actually set up the system to welcome more people. No welfare benefits, no voting, take a green card, get a job, build a life. That's what all of us did whose ancestors got here before 1924. And it worked. And it was harder then to do all that stuff than it is today. If those were the rules, the filtration system would kick in pretty well, and we would have an even better cohort of immigrants from all over the world coming to this country. If you want to see people who are proud of this country and horrified by left-wing politics, just talk to anyone from Vietnam or Cambodia or Venezuela or Cuba. These people have fled the thing that our Ivy League graduates are trying to recreate, and that was the subject of my last video. But with that, I will just wrap us up with a little ode to what the American spirit, I think, still fundamentally should be.
First of all, we're a working people. On the land, at the workbench, at a desk. And we're an inventive people. The lightning rod, cotton gin, the telegraph, the blessed anesthesia of ether, the rotary printing press, the telephone, electric welding, the incandescent lamp, the submarine, steam turbine, the motor-driven airplane, the X-ray tube, the gyroscope compass, the sewing machine, television. All these.
The internet, the automobile, nuclear power, nuclear bombs. Just about everything, just about everything.
And countless more bear witness to our inventiveness. we hunt. And we fish. Up north, down south, back east, out west. When the season opens, we hunt and fish. And we're a sports-loving people. And we're probably the travelingest nation in all history. We love to go places.
We don't usually love to go abroad, but our country's big enough that we mostly don't have to.
We have the cars, we have the roads, we have the scenery. We don't need passports, but sometimes we need alibis.
But sometimes we need alibis. What's this mid-Atlantic man talking about? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, buddy?
And we're a great joining people. We join clubs, fraternities, unions, federations. Shove a blanket at us, we'll sign up.
That was one of the most important things about American culture, the creation of a civic society, a civic life. Alexis de Tocqueville talked about this when he arrived here and he wrote his book, Democracy in America. This is one of the other things, like the perversion of immigration, that our welfare state has crowded out. The coming together voluntarily to help our fellow man in mutual aid. And the inevitable collapse of these systems is coming. And when it does, I think if the American spirit can survive, we can return to the best of our angels.
Churches, we have every denomination on earth. 60 million of us regularly attend. And no one dares tell us which one to go to. We elect our own neighbors to govern us. We believe in individual enterprise and opportunity for men and women alike. We make mistakes.
Big time.
We see the results. We correct the mistakes. We skyrocket into false prosperities and then plummet down into false, needless depressions. But in spite of everything, we never lose our faith in the future. We believe in the future. We build for the future.
That's roughly the kind of people we are. Boastful, easygoing, sentimental, but underneath passionately dedicated to the ideal our forefathers passed on to us, the liberty and dignity of man.
That was from Why We Fight. Some lovely propaganda to try to save the world. This was a long one. This is a big topic. I hope this gave you some other ways to think about this issue that is tearing some of our states and a lot of the country apart right now. And I hope you can see the positive story here, the nuance of this issue, and try to back away from the extreme polarization that is happening, the manipulation of our emotions from all sides, which I think has a lot of potentially dangerous consequences. But let me know what you think. Of course, I know you're going to head on down to the comments. There's a lot of material and resources that went into this that are all going to be over at dadsavesamerica.com. So head over there and check it out. Please subscribe. And of course, have a great weekend.